Hello, hello, hello. A bit later than planned. Still recovering from Christmas Day, but happy Boxing Day to everyone. Merry Christmas and happy Hanukkah to everyone, because obviously it was Hanukkah yesterday as well for my Jewish viewers. Ugly Christmas jersey time. This jersey comes out like once a year, so I've had it for about 6 years now. But there we go. So we are live. I hope everyone's had a very, very good Christmas. And if you are Jewish, happy Hanukkah as well. Weather's a bit naff. And this weekend into next week, the weather's not looking fantastic either. There's a chance of some snow. It's going to get colder to start next month, so that's going to be fun. Obviously, today we've had the Boxing Day football fixtures in English football, which has become a tradition since, I believe, the mid-60s. I'm going to have to look into the last time we had football on Christmas Day. They used to have football matches on Christmas Day until around, I would say, 1962, 63, I think. So the Boxing Day fixtures have been around now for around 60 odd years. We've had the Boxing Day match day fixtures. And so let's have a quick look at the scores. Quickly, let's just get the news up. Let's have a look at see who's done what in the Boxing Day fixtures, because I've watched no sport today at all. I've literally just been watching history documentaries. I've not really haven't slept well either. But Christmas yesterday, it was a nice day yesterday. It was nice to get out of the flat, see family. Let's just get the scores up. Where right. Come on. Let's have a look at the sport. Let's have a look at the fixtures. Man United Wolves is still goalless after the first half, so that'll be interesting. Fulham have beaten Chelsea. Oh, God. Right. Let's have a look at the scores and fixtures. Man City 1, Everton 1. I think that sums up where Man City are at the moment. So far today, Man City Everton was a 1-1. Bournemouth Palace was a 0-0. Fulham beat Chelsea away 2-1. Newcastle thumped Villa 3-0. Forest have beaten Spurs 1-0. So Spurs have got issues, much like Man City. West Ham getting a very important win against Southampton 1-0. Wolves Man United is still 0-0 at the moment, and Liverpool Leicester is an 8 o'clock kickoff. Let's have a look at the champion. Let's look at the Championship, and then we'll have a look at League One. Blackburn Sunderland 2-2, so we're still on our unbeaten streak. Quite happy with that. A nice draw there. Bristol 1-0 over Luton. So Luton are having a real tough return to the Championship. Bristol City are trying to chase playoff places. Coventry, and I work with a Coventry fan, and he was quite concerned about the match this Boxing Day. They've won 4-0, so I think that will ease some of the concerns my work colleague Stuart has. Been very, very concerned for some time with how Coventry are playing, but they managed to score 4 goals, and goal scoring has been an issue for Coventry. Middlesbrough Sheffield Wednesday has been a 3-3. Norwich beat Millwall 2-1. Oxford crucial win over Cardiff 3-2 because they're also struggling this season. Burnley have beaten Sheffield United, which is disappointing as a Blackburn fan, but Burnley also having a very, very good season this season. Swansea 3, QPR 0. QPR having a real tough season. Watford have beaten Portsmouth 2-1. Derby are currently 1-0 at West Brom, and Stoke Leeds is an 8 o'clock kickoff. So some very interesting results there. I'm surprised with the Coventry result, but Plymouth are all over the place this season. Let's have a look at League One. Excuse me. Leyton Orient beaten Crawley 3-0. That's a good result. Birmingham 2, Burton Albion 0. Birmingham want to get back to the Championship. Barnsley beaten Bolton 2-1 away. Charlton beaten Cambridge United 2-1. Exeter have beaten Bristol Rovers 3-1. Huddersfield beaten Stockport 1-0. Mansfield Town winning 3-0 away at Peterborough. So both teams from Cambridgeshire have lost today. Reading, local club, beaten Northampton 4-1. Reading have had a lot of issues, obviously, off the field. So that's a morale-boosting win. Wigan have beaten Rotherham 1-0. Shrewsbury beaten Lincoln 1-0. Wickham have beaten Stevenage 3-0. So one of the other reasonably local clubs to where I live has done quite well today. I work with a Wycombe fan as well. And Wrexham have beaten Blackpool 2-1. So that's League One covered. Let's have a look at League Two quickly. League Two. Let's have a look. Wimbledon won, Swindon won. So Swindon not a million miles away from where I live down the M4. Wimbledon not a million miles away in southwest London. Decent result there. Bradford have beaten Port Vale 2-1. Bromley, good result for them. 5-2 winners over Newport. Carlisle have lost to Morecambe, so an interesting Northwest derby there. Morecambe, decent lower league side. Cheltenham 2, Crewe 1. Cheltenham obviously got relegated from League One last season. Colchester 2, Gillingham 0. Fleetwood 2, Chesterfield 0. So if you're from Lancashire, you're doing quite well in League Two. Grimsby beating Harrogate 2-1. Notts County have beaten MK Dons 2-0, so everyone can feel good about that. Salford have beaten Barrow 3-0. Tranmere Accrington has been postponed. Ooh, let's have a look at that. And Walsall have beaten Doncaster. So the match has been postponed. Why? Why has it been postponed? Why? Why is Tranmere and Accrington being postponed? That is interesting that there's been a postponement there. So that's the football covered. So yeah, it's been an interesting Boxing Day. I think Man City and Spurs are both having a lot of problems, and I don't know where to go with Man City. And the fact that Pickford saved a penalty, and there was that footage of Man City in training a week or so ago in the build-up to a Champions League game where without a goalkeeper in the net, they could not hit the target. They missed every single attempted penalty in training. That was well circulated on social media and in the mainstream media. I don't quite know what's going on with Man City. Spurs as well, they're not having a great time of it either. And Anga Postecoglou has obviously been in the press, giving press conferences where he's feeling the pressure as well. What is interesting is since Pep Guardiola has extended his contract by another season, because it was hinted that he was in the running for the England job, and of course Thomas Tuchel's got that job until 2026. He's extended his contract to 2026. And in every press conference he has given, he's basically stated he does not want to work in club football after this contract is up. That is interesting. But since he signed that contract, and it's not been a good run of form, has it? He signs that contract and their form has dropped off a cliff. So whether he's lost the dressing room or losing Rodri is that much of a key loss, which I find interesting because they still have Kevin De Bruyne. Amongst other real depth in midfield, it can't be just down to one player being injured that their form has dropped off a cliff. I think they've won like one game in 12 or something. It is quite concerning looking at their form. They've got the worst form in the league apart from Southampton. So they've got to turn it around soon. The January transfer window opens in about a week's time. It'd be interesting to see if they actually do make any moves in the transfer window. Spurs, on the other hand, their form has also fallen off a cliff a little bit. There's some big concerns there. And it's going to be interesting to see if Postecoglou can turn that around and whether Spurs are active in the transfer market as well. Also, a lot of reports circulating about Marcus Rashford and his future at Manchester United. Obviously, the other day they lost 3-0 at home to Bournemouth. Bournemouth have got in recent times have got a very, very good record against Manchester United. Bournemouth are doing quite well, so that to me is not a shock result. Bournemouth are actually in the European places. Manchester United are not in the European places. And that result went to form. There'll be people saying that shouldn't happen. This is Bournemouth. They're not a big club in the sense of success and things like that. Bournemouth are doing very well this season. They're well coached. They've got a good system. They've got good teamwork. They look fitter than Manchester United. So they've got a good work rate. And it'll be interesting to see Bournemouth in the FA Cup third round, how they approach the third round, considering that they don't have any European commitments like other clubs around them. Could Bournemouth be targeting the FA Cup as a chance to get some silverware to guarantee some European football? But the way they're playing, they are a dark horse to upset some of the bigger clubs at the top of the league. Nottingham Forest also are doing really well this season. They're also in a European place. What is also interesting is the only club in the top four not to win the Champions League is Arsenal. So there's that little tidbit as well. Brighton having a good season as well. So at this point in the Premier League season, I think when we get to New Year's Eve, when we get to that point in the season, I may have a look at the Premier League table and rate clubs how I think they're doing. It is interesting, however, that Southampton they're relegated. Let's be honest on that. They're not staying up. If we're being honest, and looking at points totals as well in past seasons, when we're looking at points totals and where teams are, that Manchester United and Man City with their points totals in previous seasons, teams with those points totals have actually been relegated at the end of the season. So that's going to be very interesting to see how the second half of the season goes for both those clubs. It's an interesting one, that the power shift in the Premier League this season, how the shift has happened, and Man City, well, they've won all these trophies and they've had this great record in the last 6-7 years, and they've won 4 in a row. It's very, very noticeable how quickly the wheels have fallen off. But looking at it, it's a very dynamic league. It's Liverpool's to lose, in my personal opinion. They kick off in just over an hour and 20 minutes time, so that's an interesting one as a subplot to look at. But I think when we get past the festive period, so from now through to about the middle of January, the FA Cup third round, it'll give us a good barometer of where clubs are at going into the second half of the season and the end of the January transfer window. That will be a good barometer of where clubs are at. But I do think Southampton are going to be relegated. That's a definite. The rest of the relegation battle is going to be very, very interesting to see how that all plays out. So there we go. Thank you for the Christmas message. Much appreciated. Live stream's a little bit later than I planned. I basically have been asleep most of the morning. Didn't go to bed till late last night. Got to keep the girlfriend happy. I fell asleep on the phone to the girlfriend. Not a good thing to do. Yes, so the Sports Boffin has now got a Sports Buffet, and she's coming down at the weekend and is going to be at mine for a couple of weeks. So yes, the Sports Boffin now has a Sports Buffet, but it's been a while. It's been 3.5 years since the Sports Boffin has had a significant other, but we have some happy way to end the year. I think we've got some happy end to an up and down year. But yeah, everyone's been busy. Me today, I've just got to do the washing. Yesterday was a nice break. I got back in reasonable time to do a live stream, but I was quite full. I demolished a very nice roast beef Yorkshire pudding combo with some very, very nice roasted vegetables. Absolutely demolished it. I did also help cook the roast dinner, so I'm kind of happy with my assistance in my mum's kitchen. Nothing blew up, nothing caught fire. Fantastic. So that was a positive. But it was a nice roast, and it was a decent day. My brother wasn't too well, which was a bit of a damper on the day. But my brother's not been well the last little while. He's had some health issues, which has been a bit frustrating and a bit worrying. So he wasn't too great yesterday, but he was well enough to still be a pain in the arse, as brothers are, as younger brothers are. And yeah, hopefully, his health issues get resolved going into the new year. But overall, I mean, I didn't watch the NFL game between the Steelers and the Chiefs. It wasn't a close game, so thankfully I didn't watch that blowout. I've got to do some more NFL content. Have I ever attended a sports event on a Boxing Day? I've been to a couple of ice hockey games over the Christmas festive period. Boxing Day, no. I've never been to a Boxing Day football match. I've never been to a Boxing Day rugby match, anything like that. I have attended some ice hockey matches over the festive period, yes. Hence how I managed to acquire this jersey a few years back. I think about 6 years ago I acquired this jersey. So I've had this jersey for a good 6 years now. But I've never attended actually on the Boxing Day. Now, I have to look into the history of when the English Football League decided to move away from having the Christmas Day fixture to the Boxing Day fixture. That did happen in the early 60s, and I think it was around 62, 63. So I have to look into that. That's an interesting bit of sporting history, because obviously in the NFL, they still have the Christmas Day game. Whereas here in our major sports league, we ditched the Christmas Day game and moved it to Boxing Day. So that's an interesting one. And I have to look into the reasonings why the Football League decided to go down that path. It's an interesting one. Fixture congestion and the fact that the World Cup in Qatar has obviously, even now, 2 years later, we are still having the discussion about the impacted footballing schedule that we've had, and the effects are still being felt now. And there was I don't know why the reasoning why Chelsea had to play a match on Christmas Eve, but they did. But the European footballing calendar is still technically being impacted by the Qatar World Cup, and in part because they had to shorten the off season. In the 2021-2022 season, they had to shorten it. Plus, we also were coming out of the COVID pandemic, which also caused some issues as well. And then we had this lengthy break while the World Cup took place, which then caused a condensed schedule at the second half of last season. Into the 2022-2023 season, the second half was shunted a little bit, which then impacted last season, which I think contributed to Chelsea having to play on Christmas Eve, which is unusual, but it's not unheard of. Teams have played on Christmas Eve before because of fixture congestion or postponements. And as I found out today, the Tranmere game against, I think, Accrington was postponed today at Prenton Park for some reason. So there is always, this time of year, it's winter. We've had some bad weather this season already. We've had some postponements. There is some fixture congestion already. And of course, with the FA Cup coming along, we're going to see some more clubs have to play games at really ridiculous times in a month. We may see games played on a Thursday night, Wednesday night, to maybe even a Tuesday night league games to be shuttled in order to make fixtures. Any New Year's resolutions? I'm considering potentially, depending on how things go with the other half, potentially relocating and then moving and changing day jobs at some point, potentially. We have to see how the new year goes, but at the same time, with this and the growth on the channel and hopefully getting more revenue coming in, and if the channel continues to grow at a good rate and the view hours continue to climb and the subscription rate continues to climb, and hopefully we get more members as well, hopefully we can do this full time, which means I can relocate, which would be nice, but we're some way off reaching those earning thresholds. But that would be a nice moment if we can actually earn more than I'm earning in the day job, which means I can jack in the day job and focus on this. But it would have to be consecutive months of earning. So we have to see how this all goes. But resolutions for the new year, I think probably quit smoking. I think would be potentially one thing to do. Outdoors work is actually quite good for health. It's good for the mental health, and it's good for the endorphins. When you're doing physical activity outdoors a lot, you're getting a lot more vitamin D, and it releases all the positive hormones in your body, endorphins, and can give you a boost of testosterone as well, apparently, when you're exerting yourself. But it's the weather that's impacting me. I've had some nasty chest infections in the last couple of years, in part because of my job. And the wear and tear on the body does catch up with you. So I'm going to need some more physio on my shoulder, potentially an operation. But because of my age, I'm not going to get the surgery I actually require unless I pay to go private. I can't afford to go private. The FIFA Club World Cup. That's just disastrous. I don't understand. I mean, I don't know how it's going to work. It's going to massively impact domestic leagues and have a lot of negatives associated with that. And I don't know how it's the players are the fact that a lot of the players are raising concerns about the fixture congestion and the Club World Cup openly before a ball's even being kicked. In that regard, it says to me, at least, that FIFA obviously haven't really consulted the players and coaches, the people who are actually going to be the most impacted by the Club World Cup, plus qualification for the World Cup in 2026, which is an expanded tournament, which means more games as well and a longer tournament. So there's clearly been a real lack of consultation with the domestic FAs, I would say the domestic players associations, a lot of the clubs. There's there is, I think, a lack of consultation, and people have got a lot of people say a lot of these players are well paid. They're well ruminated, well compensated. Is I think a better way of saying it. For their services, they're in a privileged position, which is true, and former players like Mark Noble have come out and said, yeah, no, we are very privileged to be in this position, etc., etc. And yeah, okay, they are well compensated for their services at the top level. The lower down the pyramid you go, the less money players can earn. They still earn a decent wage in comparison to the average fan at a game, whose average salary is significantly less than the average player. But when we're looking at load management and player welfare, and the health impacts of playing too many games, basically, and the wear and tear on a body. I mean, look, you do a physical job, I do a physical job. The wear and tear does build up, and it gets harder and harder to recover from little niggles and aches and pains. Yes, if you do get that nasty injury, it can actually affect your immune system, because depression can have an impact on the immune system as well. And yeah, my shoulder, for example, the last 3 months has been, well, I've worked around it, basically. I'm working through gritting my teeth, basically. There's only so much painkillers and pain relieving gels, like Voltarol, for example. Not that I'm dropping a product in there, but I have to, there's only so much pain relief you can take before you have to stop taking it, take a break before you can start it again, because the toxicity builds up in your body. But it does have an impact. But I do enjoy working outside, and I do enjoy the job I have, because I'm outdoors. I'm getting that fresh air. I'm getting that vitamin D. I'm keeping physically active. Where I was working before, when I used to have an office job, you're stuck in an office 8-10 hours a day at a computer screen. It's not fun, and you're not being physically active. You're not out and about. You're not doing things. So there's a trade-off. Yes, I got paid more doing the office work than doing the manual labor, but at the same time, there's a trade-off where you feel mentally better at times, and physically you feel like you've done something. You're keeping yourself physically fit, which helps with the cardio, which helps with a lot of other things. But at the same time, because you're exposed to all these different weather conditions, heat, cold, damp, snow, wind, it does have an impact. But also having this disjointed festive period where I've got 2 days off in the middle of the week, back at work for the next 2 days, off for a day, back at work for 2 days, off for a day, back at work for 3 days, off for a day, back at work for 6 days, off for a day, back to a 5-day week. That throws you a little bit. And it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, at some point, I'm going to have very serious shoulder surgery. Now, if I was a professional athlete, I've had the shoulder surgery. I'm going through the recuperation period, and etc. And that's where they are in that privileged position. They do get very well medically looked after. At the same time, they also play through injury, and we hear stories of players taking needles for pain relief. They're strapping themselves up. They're managing an injury. They're working around an injury. And some of the damage they do to their bodies is ridiculous. And so there is a trade-off there as well. So that's why their careers can be notoriously very, very short. Some of the injuries they sustain are quite shocking, if we're being honest. Some high-level athletes go through their entire career, no major injuries. Others are riddled with health problems following it. So it's also not only are we talking about when they're playing, how they're being managed physically and medically and all that, it's the post-playing. And as I say, the majority of professional athletes play at a lower level. They're not at the top flight. They're paid less. They struggle for medical insurance. They struggle post-playing with their health issues that they have as a result of multiple injuries, concussions, shoulder problems, knee problems, rib injury, you name the injuries, that can lead to further health consequences further down the line. And it's a toss-up. You get paid really well, but then you're struggling in your 40s and 50s where you're on crutches, basically. So there is a trade-off there. Get compensated financially, but then your health is wrecked when you're 50, where someone else will go to their 70s before having similar issues with arthritis or muscular problems or other related health issues who may not have been as brutally physical in their day job. So that's an interesting one. Another thing that as I said the other day, I obviously did the video comparing the major leagues in North America and their commissioners. I will be doing an individual video on each commissioner and their time in charge, the scandals, the successes, the failures, and the various growths of the leagues or contractions of the leagues, etc., etc. So I'll be doing an individual video on each of the 5 major league commissioners. I think that's going to be very, very interesting when we get to Gary Bettman, the longest tenured one. There's a lot of controversy surrounding Gary Bettman. Same with Roger Goodell. Same with the Muppet in charge of Major League Baseball, whose name is Rob Manfred. That's the one. The other two, Adam Silver and the guy in charge of Major League Soccer, you don't hear a lot about them, which is generally a good sign. Fans don't seem to have a lot of negativity towards the commissioners of Major League Soccer and the NBA in comparison to the other 3 major leagues, which tells you that the other leagues maybe are better run potentially, or have just are working better. Who knows? I had a talk with Aussie cyclist Anna Mears. She told me about her shocking cycling injury when she was being paralysed. I seem to remember when she had her bad accident, and cycling. Some of the injuries. I remember watching the Rio Olympics, and Vincenzo Nibali was one of the riders who came off and broke his pelvis on the road race, and I remember that because it was when I think it was Chris Boardman was on the BBC commentary team, and he did a run through of the course in sections, and he got to this downhill descent, which was a very steep series of switchback S-bends, which you had to descend quite quickly, and there was a drainage gully on either side. And in the men's race and in the women's race, there were one of the female riders cartwheeled off the top of her bike and landed on her head and neck and broke her neck. Vincenzo Nibali was involved in like a 3 or 4 rider crash on the same section of descent, a corner further up, shattered his pelvis. And I remember that, and that was 10 and a half years ago. But I remember that very, very distinctly in 2016, 8.5 years ago, whatever it was. And Vincenzo Nibali was one of the best riders in the world at that point. His career never recovered. Wasn't the same rider following basically shattering his pelvis. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I forget the female cyclist who crashed in the women's race at the Rio Games on the descent, and it's the same section of descent that Vincenzo Nibali came off in the men's race, and this was a section of that when Chris Boardman did the track walk and did a little cycle on a normal mountain bike, not a road bike, but a mountain bike, and he was going through in section by section. He raised concerns about this section, and 2 corners apart is where the 2 serious accidents happen. So Nibali's accident is further up the descent, coming off one corner onto a straight, and then I forget the female rider, but she was a Dutch rider, and she went straight over the handlebars. So she's gone into this ditch gully, drainage, concrete ditch. She's gone in, the bike's flipped her over, and she has landed back of the neck and head on the concrete. Bikes landed on top of her. Now, race bikes are not that heavy, but the sheer speed they were doing, around 40, 50 miles an hour on a wet, cobbled downhill descent in a subtropical climate, it's not going to end very well. It was a very, very nasty accident. And we've seen, obviously, fatalities in cycling races. I remember I think it was the Tour de France in either 97 or 98, a rider went over a barrier and straight down a ravine and dead in the Tour de France. And now you notice in the 90s, they still had the flat, the cycling hats and bandanas, like Marco Pantini would wear his bandana. In the mid-2000s, they made cycling helmets compulsory in road racing. Whereas before you would see the cycling baseball cap, I think the cycling caps, the soft hats they would wear. They made the helmets compulsory, which has saved a lot of riders from serious injury. and mitigated the injuries they've had. But I remember Bradley Wiggins broke his collarbone once. Richie Port has broken his leg, his collarbone, his back. Loads of riders have had injuries, some very serious ones. And yeah, talking a few millimetre either way, that's paralysis. I can't remember the Aussie rugby prop in the 2003 World Cup. His neck, he had a prolapse disc in his neck, and had that gone a few inches either way, he's paralysed. Famously, obviously, Bert Troutman for Man City in the FA Cup final, where he plays the majority of the FA Cup final with a broken neck. And when they're celebrating, when they're getting the trophy, and they're patting him on the back, you can see his head's wobbling, and he was millimeters away from being paralysed. That's back in the 50s, and we see these incidents happen, and then rule changes and equipment changes are brought in. We've seen it in rugby league. I forget the player's name, but there was a tip tackle. It went wrong. He tucked his head in for whatever reason, and people blame him for his own injury. The tackle was disgusting. Let's not victim blame, which is the thing. But he's paralysed. So we have seen it. We have seen some very, very nasty neck and back injuries and head injuries that have led to athletes retiring, straight up retiring. And again, when we're talking about the contact sports, so when we're talking about NFL, rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, so when we're talking about these brutal collision sports, they are trying to mitigate head contact. What is interesting is, especially with the NRL and especially with the NHL, two of the big contact sports, as I would call them, ice hockey and rugby league, they basically said you can't get head contact out of the game. You can mitigate it. You can try and target dirty plays, but accidental head contact is going to happen. It's going to happen. Even if the hit or the tackle is clean, there is that potential that the head's going to bounce off the ground and you get concussive impact from hitting the ground, which happens and has happened quite regularly in games. Phil Clark, is that before my time? I can't remember. I forget the Newcastle player ended up with a broken neck who's now in a wheelchair. There have been a few. There's been a few where I think it was either Max or Tom Evans playing for Scotland in rugby union. I went to school with both the Evans brothers, ironically. He had a neck injury and was done. And I think it was Liam Byrne, the tackling player, basically wraps him like this, and his head ends up hitting Liam Byrne's sternum and compressed his neck, and he never played again. There was a few players with neck injuries. I remember Keith Wood, former hooker for Ireland and former captain of Ireland, one of my favourite players. He's a great pundit, great commentator now. He retired because his shoulder and neck. I mean, he had surgery, I think, in 2001, and he basically was playing after this surgery, and he was told, another injury, you're done. Like, you do that injury again, you could be paralysed. And he goes into the 2003 World Cup knowing that he's got this neck and shoulder problem that could paralyse him, played the tournament with this injury, and going into the tournament, he was told, you've got to retire. And he basically said, I'm playing the World Cup. I'm playing. And his surgeon was like, no, you seriously shouldn't do this. So he went into the World Cup knowing that if he had any problems with his neck or shoulder, he could be paralysed. So plays the quarterfinal. We see him quite tearful after that quarterfinal, and he retired. And he was advised not to play in that tournament. And he's been very, very open about the fact that he was told, like, yeah, if I have another injury here, I'm screwed. There's quite a few rugby union players, especially front row players, so props and hookers, who've basically their necks and shoulders are in real bad shape. And, they've basically been told, you've got to retire. And they could be in their mid-20s. And they're saying, it's like, no, you cannot do this. I think that one of the more recent examples of someone who's defied retirement and was basically told he was, with his neck injury, is Jack Eichel in the NHL. So he's with the Buffalo Sabres. He's got a prolapse disc in his neck. And the Buffalo Sabres are basically saying you need to have a certain type of surgery. He gets a second opinion, and the surgery that he wants to have a couple of rugby players and a couple of NFL players had had the surgery and it been successful, but no ice hockey players had had the surgery and been successful. And the Buffalo Sabres weren't willing for him to have the surgery he wanted. They were trying to get him to have a different surgery that had a different risk element and would require a second surgery, whereas the surgery he wanted would be a single surgery. And so that led to the relationship between Jack Eichel and the Buffalo Sabres breaking down. They trade him to Vegas. Vegas allow him to have the surgery. He has the surgery, comes back, wins the Stanley Cup. Because the surgery he wanted to have, which he did have, was more risky, but only required the one. Whereas the surgery that Buffalo Sabres wanted him to have would require two, and that would double the risk. But each surgery would have less risk, but overall was actually more risk, because if the first surgery doesn't work, he's definitely going to need a second one. Even if he does have the first surgery, he most likely needs a second one, but with the second one, there's the potential for more risk. So he was like, no, I don't want two surgeries. I want one. He went with one. 95 World Cup. I was so young in the 95 World Cup. I remember the 95 World Cup, but I only remember certain games from the 95 World Cup. Now, I don't think I watched every game, and I don't remember who the player was. But that just shows how rare it is where you get these injuries. And I think it was Darling, the Australian prop in 2003, had the similar injury and was lucky not to be paralysed. I think that's where 8 years apart, the same thing happens. One player gets paralysed, one player nearly gets paralysed. It's such a rare incident, basically, that there's only. But what annoys me with rugby union, and we're going to see this in the Six Nations in a month's time when it starts at the end of January, is the constant rule changes around the scrum and the engagement and the pause or the touch engage and the engagement controls that the referee gives to the front row forwards. It has changed so much since I was a kid, since I was playing at school, since I was playing as an adult in my early 20s, so 14, 15 years ago when I last, 14 years ago, I think, 2011 I last played. So the amount of changes we've had to the scrum engagement rules is I think another issue where we are having problems with injuries in the type 5 because you've got the three front row forwards, so you've got your two props and your hooker, plus you've got the two second row forwards behind. That's the front type 5. We're having a lot of injuries in the type 5. We've seen second row forwards where the scrums collapsed on them, where they're driving through, the props have stood up, it's gone wrong, the props have then collapsed and the hookers collapsed on the second rows who are still in what I call the prone position. They're still driving. The two front rows are popped up. For some reason, the scrum collapses and you've got your second rows still driving. They get crushed underneath a quarter of a metric ton of fat, basically, with three front row forwards falling on them. That's going to probably hurt your neck. So we have seen it where, especially as I say, in the tight 5 with the second rows and front rows, they're having a lot of problems. And I think the amount of injuries is actually increasing. And what we've seen is constant rule changes, or law changes, as they would say in rugby union, around scrum time. Tackle changes as well, and trying to mitigate height. Again, constant rule changes there. Some are good, some are just reactionary. And I do think that sports like rugby union and American football with the NFL and CFL are being very, very reactionary in some of their rule changes rather than being proactionary, working with medical science, working with the doctors and the physios and the players. I think the NRL does it better than the Super League. Super League's it's very similar to rugby union. No, scrum packs have got heavier, a lot heavier. Props now are 20, 25 stone, some of them. Some second row forwards and number 8s are pushing 20 plus stone. I mean, Sebastian Chabal could not be lifted in the line out. He was too heavy. And that was 15 years ago. And Sebastian Chabal would be classed as decent size number 8 second row now. We're talking some second rows are 22, 23, 24 stone. I don't know what the conversion is into kilos. It's a lot. We're talking more than double my weight. But then we've got some scrum halves who are like 15 stone. So rugby players in general, I think more with rugby union than rugby league, although in rugby league, even the small players in rugby league are bigger now than what they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Andrew Johns, for example, now would be classed as he wouldn't physically, he would have to bulk up. So even the small players, Langer, for example, would not be playing in today's NRL. He would be seen as far too small, and the Nicarima brothers, I would say, are bigger than Langer, but Langer would not be playing in today's NRL. Rob Burrow, I think, was an outlier when it came to rugby league with his size. He was tiny. He would not be playing rugby league today. The players have got too big. Even at semi-pro level, they are huge. Diets have changed, gym work's changed, the game has changed. But I would say pack weights now are ridiculous, although they seem to be coming down a little bit, but they are still bigger now than what they were when I was a kid growing up, and even when I was playing as in my early 20s, they are bigger now than what they were then. Although with some of the rule changes to speed up play, you're going to be struggling to lug around 20 plus stone to 25 stone of prop or second row. You are going to start to struggle. You need to be mobile. So some national sides are trying to find more mobile props with more explosive power rather than just a big lump to pivot the scrum. But I would say scrum packs now are heavier than what they were 20 years ago, although at the last World Cup, I did notice some scrum packs had dropped in weight by 50, 100 kilos overall from, I would say, 2015. I think around 2015, 2019 was when scrums got ridiculously. We're talking about a metric ton of 8 men, basically. And I think last Six Nations, I think the French did have a scrum weight that came in at over a ton, which is terrifying. The French and South African packs are two of the heavier international forward packs. And I seem to remember, I can't remember if it was in the World Cup or in a recent international they played, you had the scrum pack weights and it was basically 2 ton of meat. That was a lot of big blokes bashing each other. And then you look at their back lines and then you work out, oh, God, that's about 3 ton of player, 3.5 ton of player on the pitch smashing into each other. You can see why a rugby collision is equivalent to a car accident. Can I see the day when scrums in rugby union are scrapped? They haven't scrapped them in league. And league scrums have been semi-contested. I would say call them semi-contested because occasionally the opposition team will contest the scrum by giving a little shunt and winning on opposition ball. I don't know. It's such the set piece is more integral in union than league, and that's one of the major differences. So when you get a new a new fan to either sport, I always tell new viewers to rugby to watch a game of league first or several games of league first just to get the basics. And then when they get really into that, then start watching rugby union because it's far more technical in regards to the amount of set plays in a game because the scrum and the line out and the free kick penalty, for example, are so integral in regards to you're tying up a forward pack in a line out or a scrum, and you're setting your back line and any loose forwards you have in an attacking kind of chevron or attacking formation behind the set piece. Whereas in rugby league, yeah, you can have a tap and go penalty. You might do a switch play or a set play where you might have some of your outside backs and maybe a couple of your forwards doing loop runs and outside runs or inside runs or whatever. But rugby union is far more, the set piece is far more integral into rugby union. You can still win against the head. It would be nice to actually see the ball going straight and both hookers actually hooking the ball like they used to pre-2003. I think that would be nice. I think where we've gone wrong with the scrum was the crooked feed. Hookers not actually hooking the ball. So what is the point of their role apart from the line out? And even then at some line outs, hookers aren't always the player throwing in. So the scrum has gone wrong in a sense that the ball's been fed in wonky. You've got a 5% chance now of winning against the head, whereas before it was around 30% if you had a decent counter-attacking scrum. they keep tinkering with the laws. I call them rules, but it's laws around scrum time. But because set plays are so integral to the sport and how the game is played, I can't see them making the scrums uncontested because it's such a specialised part of the game. If you make them uncontested, what's the point of having props and second rows? Because then it's going to impact their physiology, how they're built, and that's going to impact the line out, which is also an integral part of the game. You are basically turning it into league light. You are basically changing how the game is played and how the forwards and backs actually work. So scrum time is important, and it's an integral part of the game. Now, it does confuse a lot of the North Americans who see rugby league as a more simple game, which a lot of people do, and they see rugby union as a bit more of a chaotic mess. Where actually rugby union's got a lot of structure to the game, and the set piece is part of that structure. I would say in league, it's very, very rare now that you get a win against the feed. It does occasionally happen where the opposition will actually push you off the ball and catch you out. But again, it's a set play where the defence and the attack are. The defence have their defence system that they've been coached, and the attack will also have their attack system, and they'll have their set plays. But they're trying to. There's less scrums now in league than what there were 5 years ago. It's nice to have recognition of the sport of rugby league, but I still think that rugby league in this country, and ice hockey as well, because I'm wearing a British ice hockey jersey from the Bees. There we go. I would say, while they're great sports to watch, they don't get the media coverage that I think they deserve with the entertainment value they can bring. Although rugby league is in this country is going through a mess, but St Helens have been a brilliant team for a long time, and I think that is a nice bit of recognition that they get recognised for their achievements as a team over the last 4 or 5 years. I think that's nice to see. But the men's British ice hockey team, I think, have been overlooked a lot with the way they've developed and the growth in ice hockey, especially when they made it to the World Championships senior level for the first time since '94, and then stayed in the World Championships for consecutive seasons. A lot of people were pissed off with that. The women's rugby union team being undefeated in a calendar year, that got overlooked, which I don't like either, because women's rugby union has developed really well in the UK, in Wales, Scotland, England, and in the Republic and Northern Ireland, in the home nations, should I say, over the last decade. So for me, there's certain. It's nice to see a rugby league team get recognised. At the same time, I think other sports are getting massively overlooked because of the dominance of football. That's basically it. Look, I mean, it would be nice to see either Great Britain or England, when they face Australia in that Ashes series, to come out winners. I can't see it, but it would be nice. At the same time, I haven't watched Sports Personality of the Year for over a decade, if not more. I used to watch it as a kid and as a teenager. Since my 20s, I haven't watched Sports Personality of the Year. For me, a lot of these award shows I don't watch, and I have no interest in them because how the voting takes place is questionable. And we've seen the same debate in league award shows. So if you look at the NHL when they give out their awards, and you see when the NFL and the NBA and all these award shows, when you're talking about Rookie of the Year, Team of the Year, this award winner, that award winner. Same with the NRL with the Dally M and their voting process. There's been some questions and eyebrows raised about the voting process, the selection process of how are they awarded various points through the season, or various rankings throughout the season, how when it goes behind closed doors, who gets to vote on what. And a lot of people have actually complained about a lot of the award ceremonies when it comes to professional sports, and the same with the wider Sports Personality of the Year, or the various other iterations around the world when it comes to the different countries who have their sports award shows at the end of a calendar year. So there's that. It's interesting. Rugby union, a club has never won it. Only national teams or the Lions. Again, I don't know how they work out the team of the year. I know the women's football team won it after they won the Euros. They got team of the year, and rightfully so. I think they deserve that accolade. But again, I don't really watch award shows. I've never watched the Oscars or the BAFTAs or the Brit Awards. So if you want the funniest comment about sports personality, listen to Punk song Bad Losers on Yahoo Chess by punk band Half Man, Half Biscuit. Yeah, I mean, I as I say, I'm not a massive fan of award shows. I never have been. I've watched the occasional award show, but I've never been enamored with these award shows and really interested. I think the last Sports Personality of the Year I watched was when James Toseland was one of the nominees, and that was after he won his second World Superbike Championship. And that was a long time ago. So there's that. I mean, but again, a lot of these award shows are very, very subjective. How do they get nominated to be on the award show? So there is that. Hang on one second. Got to keep the girlfriend happy. Yes, the sports buffet. Yes, I have one of them now. It's weird. I've acquired a girlfriend. That's why this Christmas period has been quite positive for me. Only a few arguments yesterday. But jokes aside, when they drop these shortlists, like for the Ballon d'Or, for example, I think the Ballon d'Or is a personality contest, for example, and I've never really paid much attention to the Ballon d'Or, really. When I look at the Dally M with the NRL, how do they work out Dally M points for each round? And then when it goes voting behind closed doors, how does that work? And that's drawn some controversy. The NHL awards, when it comes to who wins, the Art Ross, the Norris. I mean, the Rocket Richard is the only trophy with the top goal scorer, but then you've got the top point scorer, then you've got the Lady Bing. How do they work out all these trophies? The Calder. How do you work out who is the best rookie? Who is the most sportsmanly, gentlemanly conduct? All these awards. And again, it goes behind closed doors, and there is a certain aspect of voting. Who wins the Vesna for the best goal? Who wins the Jennings is done by the goals against average and save percentage, so that gets technically given to the team or the goaltenders. But you could argue, yes, the two awards this time after team and sports personality of the year, I think were potentially deserving, yes, in a sense. There does seem to be a bit of an agenda with Sports Personality of the Year. Looking at, I think the last 4 or 5 winners have all been female, which is interesting. But the women who've won have won in their specific sports and actually won championships or medals and been successful. So we can't knock them for that, but some of them aren't very well known. And there seems to be something. As I say, the last time I watched Sports Personality of the Year, James Toseland was one of the nominees. And he had just done something that hadn't been done since Carl Fogarty when it came to a British motorcycle rider winning back-to-back world championships. And James Toseland, I think, could and should have been a deserving winner because of the sacrifices and commitments he had made to his sport and for me as a young motorcycle fan at the time, it would have been quite an achievement. What men have won something major this year? Ooh, that's an interesting one. I'm surprised Manchester City haven't been given like award of Team of the Year or something, considering they've just done 4 in a row. There's a big push for women's sports, but I'm not. I think the way that the sports personality has been criticised for a while, though, for a variety of reasons, and its format and its viewership figures are dropping. I don't think they're at peak, but then TV linear viewership is dropping. So, so that's an interesting one. But yeah, as I say, awards. Oh god, this top is sitting funny. I haven't worn this jersey for a year, and it's weird not wearing it with a hoodie underneath. It's weird just wearing it with a t-shirt underneath. I think there is a big push for growing women's sport and diversifying sport, and I do think that is a good thing. I think there's potentially better ways to go about it that are less divisive. But again, that's neither here nor there. If you wanted to personally, if you wanted to, the personality of the year can be abrasive. That'd be oh god. Yeah, there's some interesting ones. I mean, some of the lifetime achievement awards I think have been fully deserved by some of the people who've won lifetime achievement awards. So there's that. This is the worst you've seen Man United in your lifetime. The last time Manchester United had this bad a start to the season, at this point, I was 3 weeks old. So that was 35 years ago. Man City's form is relegation form. If you look at Man City and Man United's point totals at this stage of a season, with what they've accumulated and their form and how it's been, especially with Man City's form, that's relegation form. And if you look at the points totals Man City and Manchester United have acquired in previous seasons, teams with that points total by Boxing Day have got relegated. So you could argue that the league is a lot more competitive and a lot more teams are very condensed together. You could argue that. But the fact that Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth are in the top 5 is, I don't think anyone would be betting on that at the start of the season. So someone's made some money somewhere that Bournemouth would be in the European places at some point this season and has just retired. Do you think Man City charges are looming over them? Something's gone on there, and it's more than just a couple of players being out injured, like Rodri being injured. There is a lot more going on there. Has he lost the dressing room? Has he lost the dressing room? I think their form is quite stunning. But at the same time, you look at other sports and other leagues, and I'm going to use the NHL as an example, and I will use this as an example. The New York Rangers, they got to the conference final last year. Their form over the last 6 weeks has fallen off a cliff in a similar way. The Nashville Predators in the NHL. So if you look at the standings last year to now and where they sit, they've fallen off a cliff. So it can happen from season to season that a team that is really good one year and does really well, is in the top few places in the league, and if there is a postseason component to said league, like the NHL, can do really well. Not many major changes to the team, not many personnel changes, no coaching change, maybe a couple of trades or free agent signings. For example, with the NHL, same with Premier League, Man City, not massive change in squad depth and personnel, maybe a couple of additions, a couple of players leaving, but for the most part, it's the same core, it's the same leadership group, same manager, same director of football. So the off-field stuff and on-field stuff, something has happened there, and it's more than just Rodri. It cannot be one player missing kills the team. That is just doesn't happen, because it's a team sport. If you're that reliant on one player, you are in trouble. Except Rodri hasn't been there for the entire time Man City have been a successful contending team. So something has gone very, 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 very wrong. So You could argue, yeah, the bottom 6 or the bottom 3 are dreadful, but they're all scrambling over each other. Southampton are relegated. It's everyone else is taking points off each other, winning games, losing games. So that throws it all up in the air. But Man City and Man United, Christ, we haven't seen both Man United and Man City this bad since the 80s. Let that sink in. We've not seen Man United and Man City this bad since the 80s. So let that sink in. Man United and Man City, if they continue on this train of form with how they're both playing, yes, we could see them actually drawn into the relegation fight. I don't think they will be. I think there's enough talent with the two sides to keep them afloat, but we don't know what's going to happen in January. There could be like that Leicester miracle, for example. They did the Great Escape, and then the following year they win. Where a team that is struggling to stay up now does enough to stay up. Ipswich, for example, could go on a bit of a run. They've got a good core of players there that have been there from the beginning of the journey with McNamara. They can do it. Wolves, with the changes they made, they're now 2-up. They could do it. I do think what's happening at Man City, Man United has been a basket case. Even when Fergie was there, he was papering over the cracks a decade ago. So Man United, their slow decline has become a bit more terminal. Let's be honest. This is now a terminal decline. So Man United are doing what they were doing in the 70s and 80s. They had their successful period with the Busby Babes in the 50s, and then in the 60s, they, with the surviving Busby Babes, were successful. Key component of the England squad came from Man United, Charlton and others. Their decline started in the 70s, 80s. Fergie comes along, late 80s, early 90s. They rebound. They very successful in the 90s and into the early 2000s. 2010s, they're tailing off, but Fergie's obviously papering over the cracks, but the issues are there, and then they fall off a cliff. Liverpool, dominant for so many decades, fell off a cliff. It's only in recent times Liverpool have been, competing at the top end again. So it's cyclical. Man City were a great team up until the 70s, and then 36 years. So the world is healing. It's cyclical. It is a cyclical thing. But we haven't seen both Manchester clubs this bad in a season since the 80s. At the same time, it's just hasn't happened in my lifetime. The last time Man United were this bad was the year I was born, which was 89. At this point in the season, I was 3 weeks old the last time Manchester United were in this situation. With this start to a season was 1989. And that was a point where they nearly sacked Fergie the second time. They went on to win a trophy that season. And then the turnaround begins in the 89-90 season. The turnaround begins. But at the same time, they've just sacked a manager, only the third manager in United history to win trophies in back-to-back seasons. They've just sacked, technically, the third most successful Manchester United manager. Think about it. People are mocking Ten Hag. He's only the third manager in Manchester United's history to win trophies in back-to-back years. So, by any other club's expectations, that's a really good return. It just shows how unrealistic the expectations of Manchester United as a club and their fans actually are. The ownership is now split ownership between Radcliffe and the Glazers, and the Glazers are selling to Radcliffe in stages. The reports coming out of Man United are very, very negative, though, about Sir Jim Radcliffe and the Ineos slow takeover and how they're taking over some of the day-to-day and footballing operations, the commercials staying with the Glazers for now, how the staff are being treated, the cuts, how the stadium is in an even worse state of repair than what it was under purely the Glazers. There's a lot going on there. Is this a one-off season for Forest, or are they going to be? That could be a title contender this season. They don't have European issues to deal with. Liverpool do, Arsenal do, Chelsea do, Forest and Bournemouth do not have European games to clutter their schedule. So watch this space with Forest and Bournemouth. They are dark horses. They could really upset the apple cart. Do not be surprised if they are still there at the end of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are still, and Villa as well, are still mixing it up with the others at the top of the table at the start of next season as well. I think it's clubs, Man United, Man City, they can just buy. You say that. You say that money doesn't guarantee success. Money doesn't guarantee success. It doesn't. It's all about you can spend money, but if you don't spend it wisely, it doesn't mean you're immune from failure. Many clubs have overspent, thinking we can buy our way out of trouble, ended up getting relegated. Let that sink in. No club is immune from relegation. I'm just going to put that out there. No club is immune from relegation. It would be funny to be Man United go down, Wrexham go up. That would be hilarious and potentially could happen. When more United fans realise it's not the managers. Each manager that's come in since Fergie's had a different style. So let that sink in. Each manager that's come in has a different style and approach to tactics, how they want the team to set up, how they want the team to play, the players they want to bring in, the players they want to develop through the academy that they want to also bring into the senior squad. Ironically, Solskjaer, I think, was actually the best manager they had with win percentage, which is terrifying. And he was the one who didn't win a trophy. So let that sink in. And he knew the club from the inside, having worked with the youth team and also having coached against Manchester United in the league for Cardiff. So let that sink in. So he knew the English game. He went away to Mulder, did well at Mulder, goes to Cardiff, doesn't go so well, goes back to Mulder, then comes to Man United via the youth setup. Van Nistelrooy gets Ten Hag sacked, ends up at Leicester. Couldn't make that one up, could you? Replaces Ten Hag, goes to Leicester. Big Man United. I think the structures at the club. I think since 2004 with the Glazers, this is where I think Fergie did a good job with papering over the cracks. And even with Fergie in charge, they had a lot of blunders in the transfer market. They made a lot of mistakes in the transfer market over the best part of a decade with the second half of Fergie's tenure with the Glazers. So there's things going on, which, it's a graveyard for managers and careers. Like you say, Ten Hag won things. Van Gaal won things. Mourinho won things. Solskjaer got them to a European final when he shouldn't have. And any other season, he wins the Premier League with the points total he had when he finished second. So I feel sorry for all the managers that have gone in there, but they've all had their own different philosophy on how they want the game played, which then, if you're a young player coming up and you can clearly see that the senior players are dysfunctional. So the leadership group is dysfunctional. We can all agree on that. Wrong players have been selected as captain, etc., etc. Managers, when they leave the club, basically throw players, when they basically say they're throwing players under the bus. Managers throw players under the bus in press conferences. The media's obsession with it as well. When they both get relegated, it'll be fine. Because the media will have a melt. If they both got relegated, the media would have a meltdown because it would just be hilarious. Their food safety rating did drop, yes, significantly. And there have been complaints from fans going to games, be it home or away, about the quality of the experience. Of course, you want to make your stadium not friendly for the away fans. Absolutely, you want to make the away end a little bit cramped and not necessarily as nice as the home sections. But when you've got fans going, the catering is not good enough. Stewarding's not good enough, and when you've got home fans complaining as well, and about the state of the stadium with the leaks, rodent infestation, issues with toilets, and food and drink and accessibility, something's going wrong with them. The basic maintenance of the stadium has been neglected for 20 years. The Glazers and now Sir Jim Ratcliffe are not. They're basically trying to get this new stadium built, when actually all they really need to do is just maintain the stadium they have. It's not hard. I don't know how Man United. what is funny is the fit and proper persons test was brought in because of the Glaziers' leveraged buyout. The current directors' test rules were brought in place because of Chelsea and Man United's buyouts, basically by Abramovich and the Glazers, right? That's the reason why we have the Glazer takeover would not be allowed today. But then it makes it look bad when the FA and the Premier League going, oh, well, we brought in the rules because, but it does seem to show a protective cartel of certain clubs because commercially, Man United are so important for the Premier League, for what they've done in the early years of the Premier League to establish the Premier League financially in the situation it is now is partly down to Manchester United, Arsenal a little bit with that kind of rivalry, and then the big six, basically. The commercial aspect, Manchester United changed things. So the Premier League's in a bit of a catch-22 because they've allowed them to, honestly, they should have a points deduction. If we're using that as a yardstick, this is where I have sympathy for Forest and Everton fans, where they were cherry-picked for punishment. And other clubs have somehow managed to worm their way out of punishment. I completely agree with that. They should be, but they're not going to get one. Cardiff potentially going to the 30th, the first time in 20 years. Again, Cardiff, another club that's been badly run, and again, the ownership should never have been allowed to purchase the club. But what can you do? Club ownership in this country is a mess. The club ownership rules are a mess. A club can't be £1 billion in debt and considered healthy. That has to be insanity. It's called massive loopholes in the rules for them and clubs like Chelsea to get round the rules that are in place. If the rules were strictly enforced properly, Chelsea and Man United, even Man City, who, while they're making profit now, weren't always making profit under the current ownership, they would not be allowed to get away with what they've been getting away with. Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, and what even get Newport in there. I think the police might have something to say about that. But no, I do think the footballing authorities are cherry picking the clubs they're punishing, and there's a lot of owners in English and Scottish football who should be nowhere near a football club. There's a fair few owners in Europe who shouldn't be near a football club, and there's other football clubs that are just getting away with breaking the rules without punishment, Barcelona and Real Madrid, because of the influence they have because of their global reach as a brand. So you're in a catch-22. You've allowed these clubs to become too big in the sense of their brand, but without them, the sport is not as successful globally, especially to the US and Asian markets when it comes to overseas fans buying TV packages, buying merchandise, and investing. Wrexham will overtake Cardiff. As Cardiff, I do not understand the lack of ambition. In my opinion, Cardiff have a good fan base. Wales. It's ownership. The ownership, I think, is it the Tan family? Should never have been allowed to purchase the club. Is it Vincent Tan, I believe his name is? That crazy Oriental guy, Chinese or Malaysian or something, who owns Cardiff. Wanted to change the colours from blue to red, so he made the away kit the home kit, and the home kit the away kit, and fans were like, "What are you doing?" And he's completely. He just comes across as one of those nutty, kind of heavily reliant on mystics kind of people. Reading's lucky, and they had a terrible season and got relegated. They seem to think they changed the kit colour and it went horribly wrong. And then, how is he still in charge of that football club? Do I think English Premiership rugby will get back to a strong, healthy position? Well, looking at the rebellion from the Championship downwards against the RFU and the direction the game's going with the salaries and the bonuses given to RFU executives, considering that the sport is bleeding money, I don't know, is the simple answer to that question. Rugby union financially, globally, is buggered. It really is in trouble. And they've tried to bring in the new tackle rule changes, and they very quickly dropped them following the lack of consultation with the champ. Well, I think it was Division 1 and below. The lower levels of the game have lost faith in the governing body, the lower levels of the game are feeling that the RF, I mean, Bill Beaumont, I mean, how is he still involved in rugby administration? Like, seriously, how is he still involved in? He's doing more damage to rugby union over the last 20 years than it's an old boys club. What the RFU, the Welsh Union, and even Australia, New Zealand, they're all. I think rugby union governance is in a mess. The finances are in a mess, and I go back to 2019, Augustine Pichot. He was like, "Look, this is going to happen." He saw the writing on the wall 5 years ago. He was warning about this a long time ago. He wasn't listened to. He lost that vote because the tier 2 and tier 3 nations couldn't be swayed to vote for him as World Rugby president. They went with Bill Beaumont. They went with the same guy. They went with the status quo. COVID accelerated the financial meltdown, in my opinion, of a lot of sports, but it also exposed what was simmering under the surface for so long. I think, the pandemic definitely exposed a lot of the flaws with the finances, and it exposed a lot of clubs who were just not being run properly. And a lot of that does come down to ownership and club chairman, and the financial structures and the financial rules in place. And a lot of it does come down to the governing body, be it World Rugby or the domestic unions. And change has got to happen. Structural change has got to happen. I don't know how we go about getting that structural change, but it has to happen. And Augustine Pichot, I think, has been vindicated in his position that he took in the build-up to the 2019 World Rugby election. He basically had been banging on this drum from about 2016, 2017. And he was raising concerns coming out of the 2015 World Cup. He was like, there's some issues here. And he was part of World Rugby at the time, and he was like, we have some problems here that are not sustainable in the medium to long term. And this is before the pandemic's coming along. This is before we know what's going to happen. And in following that World Cup, we have the World Rugby election, and he's like, we have problems here. The finances, that the numbers are not making sense. Either clubs and unions are cooking the books to make it look better than it actually is, or we're on the precipice of not being a sustainable professional sport. He was proved right. I wouldn't say it's been a total failure, because there's been some very successful professional clubs, but it's not working as well as it should do. And the same with the Southern Hemisphere as well. Professionalism hasn't necessarily worked as intended. One of the reasons why professionalism was brought in was, especially the Australians, and to a certain extent the Kiwis, and to a little bit some of the Northern Hemisphere nations, were concerned about rugby league, because rugby league at that time was going through the Super League wars, and some of the contracts being handed out were ridiculous. And they were looking at rugby union talent coming through the pathways. And we had in the 80s, Union, Jonathan Davis, annoying as he is as a commentator, as a pundit, one of the best Welsh 9s or 10s ever to play the game, switches to league, plays for Widnes, does all that. And I think he played league until from like 87 to like 95 or something. He switches. And players like that, the high standing in the game, were being poached by rugby league. At the same time, rugby league became what it is now, a highly paid professional sport. We have Super League set up in the Northern Hemisphere, and we have the Super League war, where the Australian Rugby League, formerly the New South Wales Rugby League, and Super League is basically throwing money around like it's infinite. And some of the contracts are massive by 90s standards. Even today, some of the contracts are pretty good for professional rugby contracts. And rugby union was very, very frightened that they were going to lose their best talent to rugby league in the Southern Hemisphere and the Northern Hemisphere. And they already were losing talent. And they were concerned that some of their up-and-coming talent through the youth system, through the schools and grassroots system, was going to be poached. In the event they go professional in 95, guess what's happened? Rugby union talent is still being poached from the youth systems of countries across the world by rugby league. And it's still happening now because rugby league can still guarantee a pretty decent revenue for a player, pretty decent salary for a player. Even if he's a part-time player and still learning a trade, he's still getting paid more at reserve grade playing rugby league than he's getting paid rugby union. It's still a thing. And so when you're looking at, Cooper Cronk, here's an example. So Cooper Cronk is coming through after professionalism of rugby union. Cooper Cronk's coming through. He's one of my favourite players. He played union at school. He became one of the greatest rugby league players of all time, in my opinion. One of the greatest halfbacks ever to play the game. Look at his premiership rings. Admittedly, some of the Melbourne Storm ones, okay, there was a salary cap breach, but look how many times he's appeared in the NRL Grand Final. One Origin, caps for Australia. He was a rugby union player. There's quite a few of them actually in the NRL right now who played union at school, who've been poached. So professionalism hasn't worked. We can't go back to the amateur ways the players won't allow it. The players have got used to wages. And a lot of the players now don't even know what the amateur game. So most of the players now were born after professionalism came about. So a lot of the players now were born post 95. They have no idea what the amateur game was, and the semi-pro kind of style of play as it was like pre-95. So it won't go to amateur status. But the current structure is a mess. Super League is not objectively better. Super League has got its own problems, and even Wigan and St Helens are losing money. So Rugby League's losing money. So there we go. Commercialism in football actually is more of a 1960s, 1970s thing. The World Cup in England in 66 is classed as the start of the modern era, basically. And as we go through the 70s and 80s, we get the game growing. The 94 World Cup, I think, is the turning point for the global game. But when we look at the game pre-94, Italia 90 is fondly remembered by a lot of football fans around the world. USA 94, while it's not the best World Cup, it really attracts the US market. And that is what FIFA was after, money. But I wouldn't say the commercialism of football in the 90s hurt Union. Union was hurting itself by remaining amateur for the entire time. Rugby League hurt itself by allowing Wigan to dominate everything. Because while they were... I think Rugby League should be more profitable than it is. Rugby Union has been mismanaged for decades because sports governance is a topic that we've covered ad nauseum on this channel, which is one of the other reasons why I did the major leagues in the US and looking at their league commissioners. Sports governance has been shocking across the board for the most part for a long time. What has exposed a lot of the issues with sports governance was the financial crash at the end of 2008, which is technically starting in 2007, but the financial crash 2007 to 2010 and COVID from 2020 to 2022. Those two events in the last 15, 16 years have really exposed a lot of the bad governance that sport has had. Those are the two moments that have really exposed the bad sports governance, where there's a lot of greed, there's a lot of imbalance financially, there's a lot of haves and have-nots, and the complete imbalance has been exposed where some teams and organisations are overspending and not saving for a rainy day when they were profitable. So they've been making a lot of money, but they've just been spending the money as they make it, rather than going, right, we're saving a lot of this money up for a rainy day fund. We're going to look after ourselves because at some point there's going to be an economic downturn. Everyone thought the money train was going to be going on forever. So they weren't being... There's a parable. There's a I can't remember if it's in the Bible or one of the Aesop's fables, where They have 7 good years and then 7 lean years. And the story is in the 7 good years, you're going to save a bit. You're going to save a bit for the hard times. So then the hard times are still just as good as the good times because you have been saving as you go. What a lot of sports did and a lot of individual sports teams did was they were making all this money with revenue, but they were spending and then taking loans while spending because the money's coming in is covering the loan interest, but they're racking up debt. But the loan interest is being paid by the revenue, and then you've got the outgoings. But it's not a problem because the money's coming in to cover the loan interest, so they're still spending money. And then the money starts to dry up a little bit, and the money's not coming in as much, and they're still got to spend on the loan interest. So I liken the current situation in football and rugby union and the other sports as the financial subprime mortgage crisis, where they're spending money they actually haven't got. They're spending money they haven't got. And well, you could actually, you're talking about wage contracts. In 1968, the late, great Jimmy Hill, he was Coventry City manager, left managing Coventry City and he joined what is now the PFA, Players Football Association, Players Union. And he argued to remove the upper wage cap because they basically, what they did was, in order to make the game sustainable in post World War II, they brought in a wage cap where the top level you couldn't pass X amount per week, which meant you could earn up to a point. And what was happening was a lot of players still actually had day jobs. And so if they got injured at their day job in the lower leagues, let's say they were a miner or a factory worker, or they worked in an office, or they worked in a warehouse, they got injured, you couldn't play. And this is at a time we didn't have substitutes. So you were really using your squad then. Player's injured, he's not playing, you have to get the reservist in. So he argued, in order to retain talent, because a lot of players left the game, and you could earn more money tarmacking roads than playing football. Put that into perspective. He argued we need to get rid of this upper wage cap. Now, at the time, it made economic sense. So you get rid of the upper wage cap, players can now earn a bit more money, and they can actually make a decent living rather than have to give up the sport. So the sport's losing talent because they're not getting paid enough. So they get rid of this wage cap, and I think about 68, Jimmy Hill gets this approved, the upper wage cap disappears, and players can now earn money, decent money. They were earning good money, but they can now earn decent money where they can do this full-time, even in the lower leagues. This is why now the non-league, a lot of clubs in the non-league are basically fully professional, is because Jimmy Hill gets rid of this wage cap. Now, at the time, made economic sense in the late 60s, early 70s. What then happens is there are some issues financially with football. Stadiums are in poor state of repair. There's the hooligan element, clubs, empty seats, low attendance. Various things are going wrong with football. We get, the Bradford City fire. We get Hillsborough, European ban. English football's in a shit show. The Premier League does come along as a response to try and inject investment into the sport. Now, very important. The year I was born, the average salary for a player, yearly salary for a player, and I've looked at different articles on this, and I've looked at different figures, is somewhere between 50 and 79,000 per year for a top flight player in Division 1. That's the average, somewhere in that range. And I've seen different figures bandied around. What you then get is that's now the average salary per week, if not more. Right? So there has been a massive wage inflation. And yes, you could argue the Premier League is part of that. The TV revenue distribution is part of that. You could argue that, yes. At the same time, the clubs are willing to pay the wages, because the Premier League at the time in the early 90s was not as strong as the Italian league. The Italian league is where players wanted to play. Serie A was the league to be in the 90s. And what was happening with the European ban was English players were going over to Europe. Scottish players were going over to Europe. They were top talent, was going to Italy, was going to Germany, and in large numbers. And these were high-profile players in the peak of their career. They were going over to rival leagues in Europe. Now, there was a point where the average number of English or homegrown players was less than, I think at one point it got as low as 25% on a match day weekend were English born or English trained in the Premier League. That number has increased significantly. It's still actually some of the lowest in the domestic leagues across Europe. That's another byproduct of the Premier League, is the influx of foreign players coming in, which happens in around, as the 90s goes on, you had a handful of foreign players. As the 90s goes on, it increases exponentially. By the time of the millennium, it explodes. Teams like Bolton and Chelsea were fielding completely foreign 11s. I think there was a Bolton-Chelsea game where not a single English player was in the starting 11. I think only 2 English players were on the bench in a game between Chelsea and Bolton. And that is the low point, I think, when it comes to player development. And people go, why have England not won the Euros or won a World Cup? That was a low point. That has started to turn around more recently in the last decade or so, where the percentage of players on a match day, like today, for example, has gone up again. But I do think the players, their agents have obviously player agents is a big part of why players are getting the wages they are as well. But the clubs are willing to pay it. Clubs are willing to pay it. That's the problem. The clubs are willing to pay these wages. And the clubs that can't afford to pay at the same rate as other clubs lose their talent. They become selling clubs. But then those clubs will pay bigger wages than the clubs below them, which is where the football pyramid is now disjointed a little bit. And some clubs had more financial backing than others when it came to ownership. So your Chelsea's, Glazers with Man United, the leverage takeover, you could argue, but Chelsea really, really disrupt everything with the Abramovich takeover. They can pay wages that no one else can at that time. Like Man City now, if there was no financial spending rules, Man City could just spend what they wanted. They actually can't. They're actually constrained somewhat. That's why they're getting done with these financial charges, is they try to get around the spending rules with dodgy sponsorship deals and second contracts for players and coaches to get around the spending rules so they could actually spend what they wanted. So it's just what it is. What do I make of what the Tyson Fury following the Usyk? I didn't watch the fight. I couldn't give a toss, to be brutally honest. I think, for my personal opinion, it doesn't look good when you're going into a press conference. Their emotions are high. I mean, they could schedule these press conferences, a bit better, allow a bit more time in between the actual fight and then the post-fight conference. I always say this with any press conference post a defeat for the defeated side, be it in a team sport and individual sport. I think sometimes, but they're contractually obliged to give these press conferences. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you've just gone, like, I don't know how it's 3-minute rounds, there's 12 of them. If you've gone the best part of an hour, having your head kicked in, literally kicked in, and you've lost, and you've not actually been knocked out, and you've lost on points, and you could argue the AI judge and all this crap, but you're not going to be in the best mood if you've just been in a fight, you've come out second best. You could argue some dubious nature in regards to potentially unanimous decision. Yeah, I know. But you've had many blows to the head. But I think the whole media circus and the whole circus surrounding boxing, for me, I don't care. I could not care less. It's not a good look, but I couldn't care less. I still think they could definitely sort out pre and post match press conferences better in a lot of sports, not just boxing. I think they could time it a little bit better. But again, these athletes, Tyson Fury is no exception, they're contractually obliged to do the media press conference whether they want to or not. And we've seen this in team sports where they're contractually obliged and they don't want to be there. And I think we need to look at that. But this is where the media, when they're getting these broadcast deals, they demand access to dressing rooms. They demand access to, we want to have a press conference, regardless if you want to give it or not. And then they end up finding players and coaches who refuse to give interviews because sometimes you just don't want to. Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua, two boxers who are clearly not at their best anymore. That would be, oh god. Well, we've been waiting for that about 10 years, haven't we? Well, the MLS, can they actually afford it though? I did my video on the commissioners. The MLS has actually had some major financial issues where at times they've been losing money. And the way the MLS has decided to get around losing money is rapid expansion. Now, that can only be sustainable for so long before they start asking for expansion fees that owners aren't willing to pay. And domestically, the MLS, while crowd numbers are decent, it's the TV deal that isn't decent. So I can't see the US with the MLS offering money actually doing it for a while yet until their domestic TV or media rights deal can match the other major leagues in regards to how much it's worth. There's a reason why the NFL is more than is a year, $18 billion a year it earns in revenue. It's a license to print money. The NFL is a license to print money, right? The Dallas Cowboys, who are the most valuable sports team in the world, is worth more than the entire value of the MLS. So until the MLS could have a team that's worth $1 billion, which is not going to happen anytime soon, they're not on the same level of compete. They're just not on the same level of compete. The Dallas Cowboys is worth more than the MLS. The Dallas Cowboys is nearly worth the value of the NHL. The NHL made nearly $7 billion last season. The Dallas Cowboys are worth more than and the Dallas Cowboys suck. The Dallas Cowboys are a shocking team right now. They're still worth more than nearly the entirety of the NHL in revenue. Now, a lot of NHL teams are over $1 billion in value, but it's revenue. And until the MLS can be worth more than the Dallas Cowboys, it's not going to happen. It's to do with the TV deal and the domestic fan base buying the merchandise, realizing that, the players domestically becoming household names rather than the players playing in Europe. Saudi Arabia, no, it's not. We said this about China. We said this about the Chinese Super League. It didn't work, did it? Saudi Arabia is going to go. They're not drawing enough domestic fans, and that looks crap on live TV. Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren in boxing. I can't stand either of them. Frank Warren is, Fury Joshua, I mean, that fight should have happened about 5 years ago. It's 5 years too late. And so you're milking a dead cow at that point. And a lot, no, I haven't been watching the darts. I've gone off darts. Have done for a few years now. Not been into my darts for a long time. And again, you've got the Hearns involved with the darts. So it for me, there's a lot of my work colleagues do watch the darts. They're very into the darts. Every morning when I get into the office before I go out into the depot, they're discussing who did what in the darts the night before and all that and the matches. So some of my work colleagues are massive darts fans, and I used to love my darts, but for me now, not so much. I watched it a lot growing up, and I was the only really member of my family that did watch it growing up. Same with cricket. I was the only member of my family who really watched cricket. And people say sports can be transgenerational, where a parent will get a kid involved. Honestly, you could argue that theory, but I don't know. For me, I haven't been a darts fan for some time, but I understand why people watch it and why people enjoy it and go to the events and go and have fun. But I haven't enjoyed darts for a long time. So, but that's just personal opinion. I've got nothing against, though. It's when people ask me why don't I enjoy basketball? Well, I didn't enjoy playing it as a kid at school, and I've never really got into the sport. I've never really found a connection with the sport where I don't mind watching it. I will watch casually. Obviously, I'll watch the occasional game here or there, but I can't get as emotionally invested in the sport it's not one of those sports that screams to me, please watch me. But I've got friends who play basketball. I've got friends who watch basketball, very, very passionate about the sport. And I can respect them for that. And I can respect those who play the sport at a professional level, how extremely athletic you have to be and the skill level you have to have, the cardio, all that. It's a very end-to-end, very, very quick sport. I can appreciate that. It's just not a sport that I enjoy. As you're in Australia, so it's your breakfast viewing. There is still money. Unfortunately, yes, there is. But it's whether people are willing to pay for the pay-per-view and actually buy tickets, because I do think that ship has sailed in regards to the maximum profit they can make from that. Sport you've gone off is basketball. I mean, look, as I say, look, I'm not a massive fan of baseball or basketball, but I will, as I say, do content for the channel. I will look into things. I'll look at historical video. But for me, I've watched the London Series games the last couple of seasons that we've had with Major League Baseball, and I enjoyed them this year more than the previous than last year. But at the same time, I was like, this is still not a great spectacle. It was better this year, but it's still not great. There's still if you're trying to attract casual viewers, and I'm more of a cricket fan, and trying to attract casual viewers, for example, Major League Baseball needs to do better. Just saying. In my opinion, they do need to do better. While it was a better product this year and the games were better this year, still massive room for improvement. Massive room for improvement with Major League Baseball with their London series. And that's just my personal opinion. They're not coming back next year. They're going to go to Paris. Now they're not going to Paris. We'll just see what happens. Usyk versus someone else. Who else is in the heavyweight division who could take him on? That's the problem. Do you get Ruiz Jr. to go, right, can you do what you did to Joshua a couple of years ago and turn up again and just knock him out and surprise him? But that's not going to happen. I don't know. The boxing has reached a point now where it's become a bit farcical. It has, and there's the lower weight divisions I think are actually far more interesting than the heavyweight division. There's not enough. I don't think there's even any fighters who are classed as super heavyweight at the moment. So I do think the lower weight divisions are more interesting at the moment. They've got a bit more going on, but they're not going to draw the same kind of draw as the obsession is the heavyweight division to become the unified heavyweight world champion in all the belts, which Usyk has now done. But at the same time, the weakness in the heavyweight division is not being offset by the strengths in some of the lower weight divisions because they don't draw as well. Because the obsession with the media and with promotion is heavyweight. Yet there are some great fighters in the lower weight categories, and there's some young fighters coming through the heavyweight category, but they're not getting pushed and they're not getting promoted. And the obsession is with a handful of fighters at the top end at the detriment of the rest. So there's a massive imbalance. Plus the Jake Paul and some of these other stupid YouTubers are not helping boxing's case to be seen as serious at the moment, which is troubling. And how some of these YouTubers manage to get boxing licenses is beyond me. And it's kind of obvious that there's a lot of things circulating about both Paul brothers about some of their dealings, which are deeply troubling. Yet, it is what it is. There's not a lot. I mean, people are still willing to buy that crap. That's the problem. The commercialization of everything, and the people are still willing to buy that shit. I'm so glad I fell asleep and I didn't watch it. I have a Netflix account. I could have watched it. I fell asleep. At the same time, the fact I didn't watch it, Netflix still paid the money out of my subscription fee to everyone who subscribes to Netflix technically paid for Paul versus Tyson, whether you wanted to watch it or not. So what else can you say? It was embarrassing. Netflix, I think, didn't do great with the buffering issues. And yet, for some reason, the NFL game that they showed last night, no issues at all. So let that. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't a good look for boxing. It wasn't a good look for just sport in general. It was farcical, and it's definitely damaged the reputation of boxing. And then you get, Tyson Fury's post fight antics in the press conference, and yeah. Oh look, my side. Look, the problem you have is this is the state of boxing right now, and the problem is people are willing to buy that crap. And I'm not being funny. Yeah, it's just it's a simple fact. This is the situation we find ourselves in. Is that the sport has definitely declined, and you could argue that it's not in a good, healthy place. If a gimmick like that is trying to inject life into the sport, it's not. It's damaging the sport's reputation further. It's embarrassing to think about it in that regard. It is embarrassing. So I don't know. Mike Tyson, he's not been in good health anyway. He shouldn't have taken on the fight, but he was contractually obliged to do so. And yeah, I've had my views on Jake and Logan Paul for some time anyway. I think they're an embarrassment to humanity. But hey, when the Russians and the Chinese come, they'll somehow not be signed up. They won't get signed up. They won't get conscripted. God, if that's the best humanity Western society can give us right now, as oh, Jesus, and how kids can see them as role model. I mean, Jesus Christ, the allegations against them about some of the stuff they've been alleged to have done is quite serious as well. Has Saudi Arabia given boxing a boost? Really? Because Saudi Arabia is interested in investing in every single sport at the moment to try and legitimize their brutal regime. But no, jokes aside, I have my concerns with the direction a lot of professional sport is taking. And I mean, when you say, yeah, I have a general concern with the direction a lot of sport is taking. I have done for some time, and yeah, I mean, there are certain sports. There's a reason why I don't watch them anymore, or I enjoy them less. And I've been critical of, as I say, sports administration. There are some sports that is just scandal after scandal. And I did that video on snooker with Mark King and his ban for match fixing. He's the biggest name player in recent times to get found guilty and banned. And as far as I'm aware, he hasn't appealed against his suspension. And guess who's involved with the administration of that sport and involved, with the Hearn family. So there you go. Yeah, I don't know how they're going to work out when to put in the fixturing in 2034. I mean, it's 10 years away. A lot can happen in that time. We've got 2 more World Cups before then. And in 10 years' time, I'm going to be 45. So, yeah, thanks for that. But no, it's 10 years away. There's a lot that can happen between now and then. A lot's happened in this year alone. But look, we will have to let's see how the 2026 World Cup plays out. Where in the US, Canada, and Mexico. Let's see how that plays out. Let's see how the 2030 World Cup plays out. And then, but there's a lot that can happen between now and then. I mean, look, I will be you know, I'll be 44, pushing 45, depending if it's a summer or winter World Cup. Let's just put it that way. I'm going to be old when that. I'll be halfway to 90. So yeah, it's 10 years away, 9.5 years away. It's 10 to 9.5 to 10 years away. If it's another Winter World Cup, I mean, look, it is what it is. As I say, there is a lot of that can happen in the time frame, but no other nations wanted to bid, and those that did want to bid were given it was very, very clear that FIFA, in order to get the Saudi sponsorship money from Aramco, it was very, very clear after the US got the co-hosting rights alongside Canada and Mexico for this upcoming World Cup. It was very, very clear that 2030 multiple nations were bidding, and Morocco bid for the 2018 World Cup, and FIFA felt a bit bad they didn't give them the World Cup, so they sort of shoehorned that one in as a co-host with Spain and Portugal, and Uruguay and Argentina, I think Brazil or Paraguay, wherever it is. And so for the centenary one, and because it was the centenary one, much like the Euros, the 60th anniversary of the Euros, we did the Pan-European tournament, which they said would never be repeated, and it hasn't been. They sort of, because Morocco had been a previous bidder for a couple of previous tournaments and had come up short, but still had a very strong bid, they were like, we need to have Morocco as a co-host. And so that's why Morocco is going to be a co-host in 2030. But it was very, very clear very early on that Saudi Arabia was going to be 2034. They had done it in such a way that any other bidder would not be given the same time to properly finance and structure their bid and put their bid forward. Australia has the stadium infrastructure in place and is planning to upgrade and build new stadiums even without a World Cup bid. So Australia would have been a perfect location. And they were given 2 weeks to submit their bid, like literally structure their bid, how they're going to finance it, the stadiums they're going to use, the time zones, the team facilities, all this. Australia were given 2 weeks. Saudi Arabia has basically been shoehorned saying, you're going to get this. And this was known about 12, 13, 14 months ago. And I was seeing a lot of discussion around basically this is going to happen. And it was known that was going to happen. FIFA have done it in such a way because no one else wanted to bid basically that far out. No one wanted to spend the money because no one's got the money. Geopolitically, it's a bit tense. Qatar having it, and there is a bit of rivalry between Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Keeps the Saudis happy. They have more money than Qatar. Keeps the Saudis happy. And so it was shoehorned in. Now we have to ask the question about why other nations weren't given, or other co-hosts potentially, other nations, other bids weren't really given time. Australia was the only other nation that had declared interest, and they weren't given time. They were never going to get a chance. Even though Australia has got better sporting infrastructure, better sporting history, they've got the facilities in place. They're used to hosting massive events like Olympics, Commonwealths, World Cups. They are there, they are ready, and they were like, nah. Well, having a co-hosted South American World Cup. I think in part, yes, we've recently obviously had Brazil, obviously not that long ago, in 2014. And Morocco had been bidding for tournaments for a good while. And FIFA were like, okay, we will basically, if you want to be a host, you've got to be a co-host. And they shoehorn Morocco in alongside Spain and Portugal, which sort of makes sense historically with the relationship between the three nations in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. There is an interesting historical relationship between the three countries, going back to before they were actually countries, when in history there's been an economic and a social and a historical relationship. That makes sense, having those three countries as co-hosts. It does. And Morocco have been bidding for some time. And FIFA were like, we've got to give them a tournament. They keep bidding for tournaments. We've got to give them one. They've got a good sporting base. They've got a history in the game, Africa Cup of Nations, and they produce some great world-class players. We'll give Morocco a tournament, but they've got to be a co-host. That's why they lost out in previous to the US and Canada was they were bidding against the US and Canada. FIFA wanted to expand the World Cup. Morocco wanted to be a sole host nation, whereas the US, Canada, and Mexico said, we'll do it together. And FIFA were like, we're going to expand the World Cup. So they looked, and that's why Morocco didn't get this upcoming one. However, Morocco was also keen to bid for future World Cups as well and keep bidding. And it's a key part of the government planning on growing the Moroccan economies with sport and with tourism and trade. And FIFA were like, oh, we'll just give them a World Cup. The thing is, it is the 100th anniversary, and yes, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, that kind of thing. Uruguay obviously winning the inaugural tournament against Argentina in the final, and the inaugural hosts, and so that kind of is cool. Should they have had the World Cup? Potentially, yes, but you've got to weigh it up. So the FIFA have got backed themselves in the corner by basically saying Saudi Arabia is going to be the only host in 2034. Yeah, the other World Cups beforehand have to be co-hosted. So basically, FIFA had sort of, to keep other nations happy and to make sure they all back the Saudi Arabia thing, has given other nations a World Cup, basically. That's basically it. While it's going to be cool to see Argentina, Uruguay host games, that will be fantastic because Uruguay's tiny. Paraguay will be fantastic for those nations to host some games. It'd be pretty cool with their history in the sport as well, and in World Cup history with Argentina and Uruguay having won 5 World Cups between them, and both been hosts before. That's kind of giving back to the first World Cup in 1930. That's kind of cool. Having Morocco co-host with Spain and Portugal as well is also kind of cool. It's the second time an African nation is going to be a host or co-host. That's kind of cool. Spain and Portugal, the joint history of those 3 nations, and if you actually look at European and North African history, it's a very, very important part of what makes modern Morocco, modern Spain, and modern Portugal. There is a lot of cultural transfer over there. That's kind of cool. So that World Cup, you could have that as 2 separate World Cups, but to get Saudi Arabia as the 2034 hosts, you have to have 6 co-hosts for 2030. That's the problem. Otherwise, you would have had a South American Centenary World Cup, and then you would have had the Iberian Moroccan World Cup in 2030. But no, Saudi Arabia have to get a World. So FIFA have boxed themselves in a corner with their corruption. That's basically it. Why money? Am I going to watch the World Juniors? Probably not. I've never watched the World Juniors, ironically. I've never watched the World Juniors. I will be watching the World Championships in May, but not really the World Juniors. It's not really my. I've never really got in even in the under-21s Football World Cup. I've never really watched the World Juniors. There are some great players. But it's not. When it comes to ice hockey, I've never watched the World Juniors. I'm more of a World Championships kind of guy. I'm not even going to watch the 4 Nations either, which is basically a warm up for the Winter Olympics. To say that we are going to go to the Winter Olympics. Yeah. Do I prefer the Euros to the World Cup? I just like it. I like watching international football when it comes to tournament football. Yes, but I still think UEFA and FIFA are terribly flawed, corrupt organisations. World Juniors. I mean, these are some really, really talented, teenagers, 18, 19, 20-year-old players. But at the same time, a lot of them haven't played against, actual senior professionals yet. Some haven't even been drafted yet. Others have been drafted. Some who are in the NHL are eligible still. But it's a very imbalanced competition because, teams like Kazakhstan, for example, have got no hope. No hope. The Swiss, their coach famously, I think it was back in, was it 2018 or 2017? That famous interview pre-match where we've got 1 second rounder. They have how many in the first round? How many in the second round? And a 4th rounder? We have 1. And that was quite a famous interview. That has stood the test of time. But now the World Juniors, well, they're very passionate, and there's no doubt on their passion and the energy they put in. it's not the same as watching the seniors do it, because some of these players may do really well at the World Juniors and then not make it at senior professional level, and their careers aren't as good. And players develop at different rates. So players who maybe rip it up in the World Juniors just hit that ceiling sooner, whereas some of the other players who may not even play at the World Juniors who get drafted actually become the better overall players when it comes to their professional senior careers. But I've never watched the World Juniors. They're not the finished article. They're still, their kids basically playing. They're not at the same level as senior professionals, not only in the NHL but the other leagues around the world at the top level. It's just players develop at different rates, and so you will have these reports coming out of the World Juniors for this upcoming draft in 2025 for those players who are draft eligible, and you will have scouts who will be, maybe the player has been drafted, but he's, not whatever, or he's not been drafted yet, or he's not draft eligible, whatever it is. In any sport, these junior competitions at the under 21 level and below and all that. And you will have talent scouts going from all the major teams, right? They will be going, they will be watching. It doesn't matter what the sport is. So we're talking about junior level competitions like the under 21s World Cup, under 19s World Cup, things like that. And professional teams will have their talent scouts going, we might want to sign this player. Or this player's in our youth system. Shall we offer him a senior contract? Do we want to keep him? Now, some of these players may not have a great junior tournament, and their draft level drops. So let's say with the NHL, they get, instead of going from the first round, they drop to the second or third round. They're a late round steal because they might have an awkward World Juniors. They don't play very well. They may not be fully fit. They may have lost a bit of confidence. They get drafted later. They end up being the better player because they develop and blossom and they have a higher ceiling. Whereas some of the so-called superstar players who've done well at the World Juniors actually don't do very well at senior level. They hit their ceiling 21, 22, whereas the player who gets drafted, who's dropped in the draft because he didn't have a good World Juniors, gets drafted in the third, fourth, fifth round, actually becomes a pretty good NHL player, keeps developing till he's 25, 26, 27, he's a goaltender, maybe even 30, and has a better senior career and actually becomes a Hall of Famer. That has happened before. What are my top 3 sporting events I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to the NRL Vegas games on the 1st of March. I'm looking forward to the Women's Euros in the summer. And I'm looking forward to 3, you said. So the Women's Euros, Vegas NRL games in 1st of March. There's 4 games in Vegas. There's 1 Super League, 1 Women's International, 2 NRL games. Looking forward to them. And it's a Saturday, so I can watch all 4 games. Get in. Whether my girlfriend's here or not will be another thing, and she's going to have to suffer and put up with that. Other one. Ironically, it's actually the FA Cup 3rd round in a couple of weeks. I don't know what it is. The FA Cup 3rd round for me is my favourite round of the FA Cup. So I would say FA Cup 3rd round, looking forward to that. The NRL Vegas quadruple header with Super League game and Women's International, so 1st of March, and then the Women's Euros. That would be my 3. That'd be my 3 sporting events. Just for the simple fact that the FA Cup 3rd round, there's something about the FA Cup 3rd round. It's my favourite round of the FA Cup. It's where you get the real mismatches between a Premier League team could get knocked out by a non-league side. It can happen. It has happened. It can happen again. Or a League One or League Two side beats a Premier League side, and there's a shock in there, and it has happened and will happen. The 4th round also has that as well, but the 3rd round is where fairy tales are made, basically. Salford fans, United fans? No. Salford's always had sports fans. It just so happens that Newton Heath moved to Trafford, which is where Old Trafford is, and changed their name from Newton Heath to Manchester United. Manchester City moved from one part, and ironically moved to another bit of Manchester. So both Manchester clubs have actually moved from their traditional locations. Um, no, there really isn't. The Rugby League Ashes, do I think it'd be one-sided? No, but I think, again, it's been so long since we've had an Ashes series, and when it comes to rugby league, that there's a lot of unknowns there. Well, Manchester City is the only club actually in Manchester. Technically, if you look at the city of Manchester, yes, geographically, but Greater Manchester, no. But Newton Heath was the traditional Manchester United before they changed name and moved. Manchester City weren't actually in that area of Manchester either originally, and I've done both club histories, and I'll have to go back and look at them, but they both basically moved from their traditional formation locations to where they are now. And of course, Man City, ironically, Manchester United's record attendance is not actually at Old Trafford, it's at the Old Main Road, I think in 1948, and I've covered that on another video on the channel of I think I did top 10 or top 20 attendances, football attendances in this country. And Manchester United's most record attendance is not at Old Trafford, it's at Main Road. Or India not having a good time of it against Australia. Is it Costas, the 18, 19-year-old who's just basically, embarrassed them? But no, there's some interesting subplots when it comes to what's going on in the world of sport. But yeah, I think India playing a Test series in England, that could be feisty. I think, however, Trafford, is it Salford? Is it Manchester? Traditionally, is it Manchester or is it Salford? You are sort of in like a bit of no man's land there with Old Trafford. Traditionally, historically, it's Greater Manchester, but does it come on? Is it more influenced by the city of Salford, which actually is a city in its own right, or the city of Manchester in its own right? That's the question. But Manchester as a city's got a weird layout. It's got a weird geographical layout, how it's shaped. It's shaped like an oblong. And it's not like a circular city. It's weird, like rectangular oblong shape. So, but no, Trafford, well, where Old Trafford sits, but Trafford, it sort of sits between Salford and Manchester, traditionally, geographically. It's a weird thing. Greater Manchester is sort of shaped like Greater London in a sense of it's a kind of a big circle. But Manchester itself is like this weird kind of, not quite a boomerang, but it's a weird rectangular oblong kind of shape if you look at it on a map. And Greater Manchester, the way they split it up into the various parts, it's odd. It is odd. What's my thoughts on F1 going back to Africa? I couldn't care about F1 really. F1 for me, I haven't watched F1 for a long time. I haven't enjoyed it for a long time. I haven't watched it for a long time. Going back to Africa. For a long time, it went to South Africa. I don't know. I don't know, really. It's an interesting one, but at the same time, F1 is doing things that I just scratch my head at, and I'm not sure necessarily are the right decisions. But some of the decisions taken by F1 are head scratches. I'm not against obviously trying to grow a sport and bringing new nations into a sport, especially an international sport when you've got an international calendar and it's a world championship kind of thing. Would Rwanda be my first choice? Probably not, although it does work for the European time zones. If you're talking about TV audience, it actually works for the European time zones, ironically. So we shall see. Cadillac coming in 2026. We're interested to see 22 drivers on the grid again. Cadillac have also got a very, very good hypercar program. So they've got a lot of experience with developing cars as well, and working with regulation changes, which we've seen in the IMSA series and the World Endurance Championship, where Cadillac do have a factory supported team, and they have developed their own hybrid engine in those categories. So while Cadillac will not actually have a Cadillac engine, I believe it's going to be a Ferrari engine or something like that. I can't remember. What is interesting is Cadillac, as I say, in the IMSA Endurance Series and in the World Endurance Championship Endurance Series, they have developed a very, very good hybrid engine. They have won championships. They have been a very good. They've been a race winner. They definitely in IMSA they've been a very good. Very, very good manufacturer. World Endurance Championship, they've not had necessarily that same success translated, but it's a more competitive, I would say, with more manufacturers in the World Endurance Championship than over the IMSA Championship. But in IMSA, they've developed a very, very good hybrid system. It's a very, very noticeable engine note they have. So F1 having a hybrid system, it's going to be interesting if Cadillac actually becomes an engine manufacturer, although F1 has decided to reduce the number of engine manufacturers, which I find weird. I find that weird with how few engine manufacturers are on an F1 grid now. Whereas I look at the IMSA grid, for example, and you've got Cadillac. They develop their own engine. You've got Porsche, plus client Porsche teams develop their own engine. You've got Lamborghini. And that Lamborghini engine is bespoke for that hypercar. So that's an in-house developed engine. You've got BMW. You've got Acura, which is also technically Honda, but you've got 5 engine manufacturers. You'll have Aston Martin next year. And each factory team develops their own engine. And so you're going to have 6 different engine manufacturers for, is it 9, 10 teams next year? So 60% of the grid is basically a factory team in regards to engine manufacturers. And then the other couple of entrants on the grid are customer teams. So Cadillac has 2 teams on the grid, Acura has 2 teams on the grid, and so they get factory support. Porsche has 3 teams on the grid. 1 is a factory team, all factory supported, 2 are client teams, and then you have Aston Martin, BMW factory team, obviously, Aston Martin and Lamborghini. And I think Aston Martin are also developing the engine from the Valkyrie. So all these engines are bespoke, basically, and they're all hybrid. So I find that interesting that on the F1 side of things, you have an Aston Martin team, doesn't have an Aston Martin engine in the back. Cadillac team is not going to have a Cadillac engine in the back, yet they are developing their hypercar engines for IMSA and WEC, which are also hybrid, and yet they're not transferring that over. I find that weird. I find that weird that F1, you have a limited number of engine manufacturers, many customer teams, whatever, how much factory inputs in that, I don't know. The Endurance Championships in World Endurance and IMSA, multiple engine manufacturers, many manufacturers, bespoke engines made for the cars. A lot of, they are hybrid as well, and I just don't understand. This is where I think F1 have just, there's too many privateer, I would say, teams or semi-fact. It's just, I don't know where F1's going. Now, whether that's engine manufacturers and car manufacturers going, we don't want to do F1, we're not interested. Although the World Endurance and IMSA Endurance Series, we can actually get better input for our road cars. It may work better. And for whatever reason, you're actually getting more engine manufacturers in the Endurance Championships than in F1. And F1 was seen as the pinnacle of motorsport. It isn't. Honestly, the pinnacle of motorsport is Le Mans, in my opinion. That for me is the pinnacle. You win Le Mans as a manufacturer, but in any of the classes, there you go. you want to see a Grand Prix in Finland as the final race. Well, that'd be interesting because it'd be snowing at that time of year in Finland. So I've never seen an F1 race in the snow. I don't think it will go very well. There was a man from Aston who had an Aston Martin and supported Aston Villa. Probably that wouldn't surprise me. Manchester Storm, now they're in Altrincham, if I remember correctly, which is Cheshire. Altrincham traditionally is Cheshire, but comes under Great Manchester now. But no, if we're talking about, the 24 Hours of Daytona. Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to 24 Hours of Daytona in a month's time, as well as a sporting event. That's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to 12 Hours of Sebring as well, in about a month and a half's time, something like that. And the Petit Le Mans at Atlanta Raceway at the end of the season. So the IMSA, there's 3 races I'm looking forward to. They're the long endurance races. My 2 favourites are Petit Le Mans and 12 Hours of Sebring, because I can do that in a day. I can watch the whole race and not worry about falling asleep. Whereas 24 Hours of Daytona, that's a bit of a caffeinated weekend, and maybe won't be able to fully physically do that. Considering at the end of the month I'm going up to see my girlfriend in Cambridgeshire. I don't think I could do 24 Hours of Daytona this year. Did it last year, did it this year, but next year I don't think I'll do it. But they're the endurance races I'm looking forward to is Daytona 24 hour, 12 Hours of Sebring, and 10 hour Petit Le Mans. They're my 3 favourite races, the endurance races. I actually enjoy them over more than Le Mans, actually, to be fair. But Le Mans is just a special race on its own. And if you win Le Mans, I think that's the pinnacle of motorsport. Honestly, people say that, F1 is the pinnacle. I don't think it is anymore. I don't think Formula One is the best category of motorsport anymore. I don't think it's the best race series. I don't think it's the pinnacle. And I think there's a lot of issues with F1. The direction the sport's taking, the direction of engine development, car development, rule regulation. I honestly prefer the IMSA and the IMSA series over World Endurance Series, personally. Although the World Endurance Championship, I think, has some better regulations in there in regards to safety flags, virtual safety car, short course yellows, things like that. I still think the IMSA regulations are better than the WEC regulations for the cars, because they are slightly different, and I think it does work in the car regs better. In saying that, I also think the circuits are better that they race on as well. I think they're more interesting. That's, again, personal preference, but I wouldn't say for me F1 is not my favourite category of racing. Anyway, I'm going to call that a live stream. I've got an early start tomorrow. I'm back at work. To make F1 great again, take away Vegas, Miami, and Qatar. Replace them with Kailami, which is in South Africa, if I remember. Hockenheim and Estoril. 24 drivers, 4 dropped. 4 worst, 2 drivers have to get dropped from F1, replaced with 2 new. I would definitely get rid of the Vegas one, but it's Liberty Media. They're an American concern. They want to grow the category in the US. They want to obviously get a lot more American fans on board, which is what F1 has struggled with in the past. I don't know. I think they got some of the regs wrong. I think the sprint race they've just Americanized it. The season's too long. My work pattern. I was off today. I was off yesterday. I'm off New Year's Day, and then I'm working this Saturday, next Saturday, and the Saturday after. I managed to book the 31st of January off, and I'm spending that with my other half. So yes, I have a girlfriend now. I'm humaning. I'm adulting. My work pattern is just out the window, really. So I start earlier on Saturday. I've just got to work 3 Saturdays. Not looking forward to it. And then I've got to finish work, rush home Saturday. My girlfriend's coming over. She's driving down from Cambridgeshire, so I've got to be back here, make sure I'm in so she can get in, get dinner sorted, get work uniform clean, get dinner on, get her sorted out in regards to make sure she's all right. Food, I have to do food shopping. Am I doing a New Year's Day stream? I don't know. I'm got my girlfriend over, and I'm going to my mum's. And I'm not sure my girlfriend would appreciate me neglecting her. I think that would be a bit unfair. But I'm also going to my mum's New Year's Day as well, so I don't know. Possibly. But plans are a bit fluid this time of year because of my work commitments, and then I aim to have things a bit more structured from February onwards, and a bit more balanced. But we shall see what the new year brings and how things pan out with various bits and pieces over the next little while. But I don't know. New Year's Day, I'm pretty busy. I finish work. Oh God, what am I doing? I'm working New Year's Eve. I finish, rush home, and then spend it with the other half. New Year's Day, go to mum's. We're going to my mum's for lunch. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm learning how to do adult stuff, so I don't know what's going on. I generally don't know. It's so hectic this time of year. Everything's all up in the air, so I don't know. But I'm birthday tax. Yes, birthday tax. Yes. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to call that a stream because I've got to sort my washing out. I've got no work uniform for tomorrow. That's going to be fun. I've got nothing ready for tomorrow. This is ridiculous. So I've got to sort that out. And then I've got to sort the flat out tomorrow because it is a shit tip. So I've got to go to work tomorrow, get home, tidy up the flat. That's going to be fun. Adult stuff. And then go to work Saturday morning, rush around at work, get done, get home, finish off sorting the flat out. Girlfriend turns up in the afternoon. Then I've got to sort out dinner. Then I've got to sort out shopping all my work uniform again. Oh, it's going to be fun. I don't even know how long my girlfriend's staying for. I think it's like 2-3 weeks. I don't have a clue what's going. I generally do not have a clue. January is going to be just fun. January is going to be fun. I have no idea. I am so like don't know. I just don't know what's going on. That's the best way to be. Is just don't know what's going on and just smile and thumbs up and pretend you know what's going on, but really you don't, and just bumble your way through. It's generally what I've been doing for most of my life, but this time I'm actually a professional bumbler because I've got so much to sort out in the next 24 hours. So I've literally finished this up, sort my washing out, which I took out the washing machine before I started the live stream, so it's just been sat in the wash bag for 2.5 hours. Hang that up, air freshener. I can't be asked to do the washing up. That can just stay in the sink. Then I've got to sort out when I get back from work tomorrow. I've got to tidy the flat, sort out fresh bedding. I've got to wash this. I've got to, I have to do adult stuff. I don't like adult stuff. I've got to be an adult. I've got to be a responsible adult. Responsible adult. It's just not going to happen. But yes, so jokes aside, I've got a very, very busy. I'm back at work tomorrow, as I say, working Saturday, and then I literally will have a day and a half with the missus. She's going to basically stay in the flat while I'm at work Monday and Tuesday, although I haven't even sorted out a spare key. Shit. Then I've got to, so much to sort out. So much to sort out. But New Year's comes, get out of the way, and then figure it out from there. Don't have a clue. Do not have a clue. I may do a live stream New Year's Day. I don't know. It depends if the other half will let me. Depends if she lets me. Because I have promised a romantic evening / day, so I don't know. So she may beat me up. But anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. Thank you very much for all your questions. Really appreciate it. And I shall have some more content for you guys. No, I don't know. No joint appearance. No. This is my hobby. This is my space. I think she might hurt me if I asked her to come on camera. She wouldn't appreciate that, I don't think. In saying that, maybe in time. But I do want to live longer. And so, yeah, I want to live longer. But there was one time I was doing a live stream and my ex-girlfriend was here, and then her arm just like got in the way, and I was like, what? And then she got really, she wasn't happy, and then I got arguments. Channel on my other channel, the History Boffin, we might do some more content on that. I'm planning to do some more content on that. I've actually got some books that I'm going through and reviewing and looking at, and some films to look at, and I've got some other books that I'm sort of reading at the moment. So it is still there. I've got some ideas for the other channel, and actually, the girlfriend's going to help me with the other. I've got some ideas I want to bounce off her because she's actually a bit of a history nerd as well, which is kind of cool. So we can sort of have a think about some content for that at some point. But it's still online. I just haven't done any content for a while. But yeah. Anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate some of the questions. We discussed some interesting stuff. And yes, potentially. But yeah, but I've also got a couple of ideas for some film reviews as well. So there's a few ideas rattling in up here. I have neglected the other channel, and I do need to address that. I do need to get some more content up on there. But anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. Thank you very, very much for all your questions, and I will have some more content for you guys in the coming days. Keep your eyes peeled, and I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon. But it is for me. Goodbye for now.